It's time for another edition of some Thursday Night Live handicapping. Very excited to be talking races with you, David Aragona, Gino Buccola. And David, we have a very big weekend. I think between the three tracks that we may dive into, 12 graded stakes races. My voice is raspy because we've already done so many previews over the last couple of days of different stakes races. I think 5 at Belmont at Aqueduct, 5 at Santa Anita graded stakes, and then 2 more at Churchill. We are really getting into those last round of prep races heading into the Breeders' Cup.
Yeah, Gino, I think I really loaded you up on the schedule this week. I've had you talking all day with the stakes previews, Sports Grid, and now this show. But yeah, there is a lot to look forward to this weekend. I mean, in the old days, we would call this Breeders' Cup preview weekend. All the horses, all the top horses in the divisions would be having their final preps this weekend or the next weekend. It's kind of changed in the modern era. A lot of the horses maybe finish their preparations at Saratoga and Del Mar and freshen up for the Breeders' Cup. But we've got some horses that could be big prices that we see on Breeders' Cup Day that might win some of these grade 2, grade 3 preps this weekend. So really interesting racing. Maybe not the biggest fields that you'd like to see that you might get in sort of the middle of the season, but still interesting racing going on over here in New York and also out where you are at Santa Anita.
Yeah, I think you were kind of hitting on it. It feels like we're almost getting maybe some of these qualifiers or horses that weren't sure if they were going to be able to make it in, as we kind of know some of the headliners in the big races so far. But David, we can bounce around. We can answer some questions and some comments. We can look at a few different tracks. You have any place you'd like to start?
Why don't we start in New York? Because I think we'll be able to move through the Aqueduct races more quickly than we can the races out at Santa Anita. Maybe we'll finish up at Santa Anita. I didn't look that deeply at Churchill. I did glance at the Lucas Classic. Agreed. Maybe if we want to touch upon that when we can, we'll see if we get any questions about that. But yeah, let's start at Aqueduct and we can move through some of these stakes races fairly quickly.
David, we'll think about this overall as we're talking, because I thought this was a good question from Eric. Eric does some NFL stuff for us. Any of these races have horses you think could win a Breeders' Cup race, right? Even looking ahead. So as we kind of go through them, we can maybe even say, yeah, this horse, if they were to win, they may be live or logical if they were to qualify in a spot. It's kind of a good way of looking at it, Eric. Even if you don't like every race we talk about, you may want to keep an eye on if these horses qualify, could they be live?
It's a really good question. And I think a lot of these races, the answer is going to be no. There is one race in particular in New York that I think could produce some major players in a Breeders' Cup race. We'll get to that probably the second race we talk about. But why don't we first dive in with this Belmont Turf Sprint? Not a race I expect to produce too many top contenders for the Breeders' Cup Turf Sprint. I'll just mention, Gino, this is a race that obviously doesn't have a standout on paper. The horse that's likely to go favorite, I think, is the number 5, 26 Black, who's paired up a couple triple-digit buyers in his recent starts. I like that he showed a little more tactical speed last time in another paceless race, and I say that because as I take a look at the Timeform US pace projector for this race, don't see a whole lot of speed in here. I mean, you could see some of the horses that are close up to that pace on the pace projector, Aragona and Senbei. They're not exactly horses that need the lead, and I think Dancing Buck, the number 2, could be an intriguing runner in here because it just felt like he really needed the race off the layoff last time when he returned at Saratoga. Didn't make it to the front end, got rated behind a slow pace, couldn't really kick with those horses at the end. Like I said, coming off the long layoff, probably needed that effort. This time, I've got to think that Kendrick Carmouche is going to send him right to the front end. He loves the 6 furlongs at Aqueduct, and I think if he can get back to some of his good form of old, he could be tough to catch in this spot.
Yeah, he has one of the higher ceilings in here, David, too, because I think the bulk of this field, there are a lot of horses that aren't the top turf sprinters. They're kind of in that grade 3 to like listed sprint. They end up facing some good horses in turf sprints because there's not a lot of options. But you see horses like Senbei and Aragona and 26 Black and Bull Journey, and they're fine. They don't really excite you all that much to bet. You've kind of seen them over and over. But Dancing Buck being gone for the year plus, like you mentioned, you can look at those last 2 races and completely dismiss the Jaipur race right before the long layoff. The race coming off the long layoff last time out absolutely ran like a horse that needed it. Didn't even get to the lead that day. And I think in here, where there's not as much speed in the inside draw, this horse gets more forward. I think will run very, very well. And I completely agree. It just feels like that good spot, second start back, likes the trip, likes this turf course, just a lot of positives.
Yeah, the other thing about him that I should mention, and we can kind of keep it in the back of our minds as we move on to the next race, is it did rain today in the New York City area. There was a wet track off the turf. Will probably still be off the turf for a few races tomorrow on Friday. So while I think the turf course should be good to firm by the time we get to Saturday, Dancing Buck is a horse that in the past has done very well when there's a little bit of give in the ground. He actually won this race with the top buyer of his career back at the end of 2022, a 103 buyer when he wire filled by 5 lengths at Belmont Park over a yielding turf course. So any more rain that falls between now and Saturday is going to benefit this horse.
And that's the first of the graded stakes races. We can continue right along if you'd like to the Joe Hirsch Turf Classic, which isn't a big field, but you have some very talented horses in here, David, and kind of competitive. Obviously, you can start with a horse like Rebels Romance, the 2-time Breeders' Cup Turf winner. This horse who has a 19-time winner and has been all over the globe. Appleby, Godolphin, Dettori is aboard this guy, but he's just a top class horse, and he's probably the horse we should start with, and one that'll take a lot of money in here.
Yeah, I mean, when you start the conversation of who could be competitive in Breeders' Cup races coming out of this weekend, I think you've got to go directly to this horse because
he's won it twice, right?
Yeah, he's a 2-time winner of the Breeders' Cup Turf. He'd actually be trying to accomplish something pretty historic if he goes for a 3rd Breeders' Cup Turf victory. Because correct me if I'm wrong, Gino, I think the only horse in history that's won 3 Breeders' Cup races is Goldakova.
I think so.
And I don't know that there are too many horses that have accomplished their Breeders' Cup victories over the span of 4 seasons. I know Beholder won a couple of Breeders' Cup races, I think between 2013 and 2016, but none in between. This horse would have won Breeders' Cup races in 3 out of 4 years if he's able to win it again this year. We'll see. That's a pretty tall task. But I mean, when you look at this horse's PPs, Gino, it's kind of amazing. I mean, I feel like I've always underrated him a little bit, but when he ships in for this race, and you kind of have to appreciate the fact that he's 19 for 28 lifetime, he's won all this money. I think he's got 8 Group 1 victories all over the globe. I mean, you could nitpick and say he's never won a Group 1 in Europe, where it's probably the toughest to do so. But I mean, he's been right there against some of the best horses in the world, like he was too back in that Group 1 King George VI and Queen Elizabeth Stakes, one of the premier races going 1.5 miles in Europe. And by the way, we can't pull up the replay in Formulator for a foreign race like that, but if you do watch that replay on YouTube from the Group 1-2 back at Ascot, he had a bit of a trip in there. He was kind of steadied in mid-stretch. He arguably could have finished closer to the winner at the end of that day. So he's really good. It's just a matter of how short a price you want to take on him, Gino, because for just a 5-horse field, and there are only 500 for turf, you could make a legitimate case for just about every one in this group.
I agree.
They're all grade 1 caliber horses.
Yeah, Rebel Red would based on your morning line too, probably be the most surprising just recently. But I think about El Cordobes, what's done recently. There's not a lot of speed in here. Could redistricting get that kind of trip? And then David, I think you like a little bit the outside horse, Far Bridge. I actually spoke with Miguel Clement, a little bit of a tease for one of our next Off the Track podcasts that'll be released next week. We talked with him today about a little bit about Far Bridge, but mainly a deterministic, some of the other horses. And he's still very high on Far Bridge and thinks his horse has a ton of versatility, thinks he's doing really well and could bounce back. And it's kind of a strange trip, David, because he is a horse who likes to make early moves in his races, but he's generally a little more relaxed, and he just didn't seem comfortable in much of this race.
Yeah, let's talk through the beginning portions of the Sword Dancer, because I think it's key to assessing this horse's performance, because obviously the result was disappointing. Far Bridge has been so consistent this year, and a poor effort like this, you kind of wonder what caused it. But you could see, I mean, as you said, he's a horse that loves to ride the rail in his races. He's a real rail runner, and whether he's on the lead or coming from last, as long as he can have that inside position, that's when he runs his best races. And you could see maybe the other riders were a little bit aware of that in the early stages of this race. He also broke from post 6, so Joel Rosario was always going to have to get a little bit lucky to get to the inside, but you could see all the way around that first turn, he can't get this horse to the inside, and Joel has to make a tough decision here. Does he just sit 3 wide and hope that the race comes back to him? That trip often doesn't work out around a 3-turn turf marathon, so he makes the call, the audible to go forward, try to push the pace just enough that he creates a gap right here where he can angle over to the inside. But in doing so, he had to use this horse a little bit, because you see the half mile went in 47-2. That's a pretty honest pace for the 1.5 mile distance. And this is a race that's going to come apart a little bit at the end. So Far Bridge did have to get used a little bit to create that gap, make that middle move. And you could even see once Joel got him into the pocket there, he didn't want to settle right right away. He got a little bit keen. He settled by the time we get to the backstretch here, but I do believe that when you get to the latter portions of this race, you're just going to see that using this horse in the middle of the race, it did detract from his finish. So I'm going to use that as an excuse for him. Obviously, he ran a little bit worse than I would have liked. I would have wanted to see him hang around a little bit better, but I just think that poor effort showing his PPs, Gino, is going to inflate the price this time. This is a horse that has been a short price in a number of his recent races, and I know he's got the talent to win a race like this, and he's another one that is going to be aided by any given the ground on Saturday.
Yeah, it's a small field, so he's not going to get hooked as wide because there really looks like there are two horses that want to go forward in here. I think it's going to be him in redistricting that are going forward. If one of those horses wants to go to the lead and the other one wants to sit second, they'll probably be really comfortable and fine with those positions, David. I don't think they'll be battling, and I think the other three horses would be very content sitting third, fourth, and fifth there. And that's what is going to be different about the trip on Saturday for Farbridge, who is a horse that is coming off a disappointing performance, but you know his ceiling is good enough to win a race like this, and he might be bettable for one of the few times recently. Like this, for us gamblers, this is a horse, unfortunately, who a lot of times we're trying to beat. It's interesting when you get to come back to a horse like this and they finally offer you a little bit of value, and it's usually coming off of a disappointing effort like that. So I never mind playing horses like this. I think he should get a real nice trip in this race, either on the lead or sitting second. I'd love if Joel from the outside looked over and then just went.
Yeah, and he's bounced back from poor efforts when he hasn't gotten his preferred trip in the past. When we saw that happen in the United Nations last year, when he was hung 3 wide around most of the turns, and he came right back after that and won the Sword Dancer and this race last year. So I'm not too concerned about him getting back to form. And he's just, like you said, he's got that versatile running style where he can make his own trip. I mean, Gino, at the end of the day, this race really comes down to whether or not you trust Rebel's Romance to produce his best form, kind of acknowledging that the target is next month's Breeders' Cup. Is he really going to be primed for his top effort on this day? I mean, he's a horse that generally does show up more often than not. You can see that in his career record. But let's remember, they did bring him for this race back at the end of 2023. Now, the 2023 season did not go ideally. He, remember, lost the rider when he clipped heels in the Bowling Green, and I guess he was a little still discombobulated in the Turf Classic that year, but that was a day when Belmont, or I should say Aqueduct, took a whole lot of rain. Didn't seem like he loved the course on that occasion. So he's coming back to the site of that disappointment. Probably it's apples and oranges comparing because the campaigns had gone so differently up until that point. But it is just something to keep in the back of your mind for a horse that's going to be a pretty short price.
Yeah, and in a race where it seems like there might be at least 2 or 3 other like legitimate contenders that he'll face. I didn't know what to do with redistricting, David, because I've kind of gone back and forth on this horse through his career. He's sort of changed him and who he is now, gone forward a little bit more, going longer. This is definitely going to be a step up in class for him based on what he's been facing. But even just from an opponent of Rebel's Romance, this horse will likely be forward and could maybe get the jump on him. But I actually really do respect the one. El Cordobes is like a legitimate contender in here coming off of that Sword Dancer effort. What did you think about him and how he stacks up here?
By the way, shout out to Nick Sievers, who dropped us a comment. Great cards this weekend. I agree. As for El Cordobes, we saw the whole replay of the Sword Dancer. He got a really good trip in there. He was sort of sitting in the pocket every step of the way. He had to wait a little bit longer than Rebel Red, who was able to move first coming off the far turn. But Flavian Pratt did a great job finding a seam for him. And once he found that daylight, he just shot on through. And I like that he was able to show that turn of foot because having watched a lot of his prior races in Europe, he was sort of a grinding type. He had been prominent in those races, had sort of not shown a turn of foot, but been able to use his stamina to get the job done. I like that he was able to adapt to American racing last time, but I mean, you got $10 to win last time. He's probably going to be a shorter price here against what is probably, or almost certainly, a tougher rival than he faced in the Sword Dancer. So I think last time was the time, but I won't be surprised when he gets another good trip in this race.
Yeah, not the big field, but very, very strong field, even with just a group of 5. And David, we may need you to call in a favor here because Craig says, I look forward to this show. We need an Andy Serling guest spot at some point. So maybe on a weekend when we're talking New York, or
I'll have to work on that one.
Yeah,
you'll have to work
powers on that one. I know, David, you can persuade some because you are very well respected in the world. Thanks to Craig. Thanks to Eric. Anyone else checking in? Let us know if you're looking at the races at Belmont and Aqueduct. Then we're going to head on over to Santa Anita in a little bit. We might check in over on a couple big races at Churchill as well. So let us know if you have a selection or maybe a horse that you'd like us to pull up and take a look at. Any other thoughts here, David?
No, I think we can move on. I mean, it's a really interesting race for a 5 horse field. I mean, we spent 10 minutes on it. It
Yeah.
just is that kind of race where you've got some really likable, just talented horses running. And I'm intrigued to see how it plays out, especially given that it's one of the few races that does have Breeders' Cup implications this week. But I think we can move on over to the Woodward. Now, we did see some reporting from our colleague Dave Grenning that we're probably going to have at most 4 scratches from this race. It's looking likely we're going to have 4 scratches. And I'll just list the horses that are going to compete here that are confirmed to do so are Post Time, Phileas Fogg, and Locked, who are the 3 main players, but it is kind of disappointing for a race that's had the historical importance and the prestige of the Woodward that connections are willing to look elsewhere, not shooting for a victory in this race. But a lot of races that used to have a whole lot of importance have kind of been demoted in the face of the Breeders' Cup, and this is one of them.
And you were posting about this on social media too. You look in particular, you've got a race like the Woodward, and then at Churchill, you've got, I think, the Lucas Classic, and there's a 1-turn race too with older horses that are both there. And so if you were to have just one of those races instead of the 3 of them, then there would probably be a couple horses from there and make this race stronger. But yeah, there's just a lot of options for some of these horses. And it just makes it tougher to really handicap this race or to really know what you can take out of it for any of these horses moving forward, because I do think the 3 horses that are left are all really interesting for the different reasons moving forward or in this race. If you wanted to bet this race, I've always been a fan of Post Time, David. I played him in the Breeders' Cup last year. I've tried to play him in a few spots kind of like this when he stepped up. He beat up on Softer Company last time out. He's just a good horse, and I think had a big win in there somewhere. But in a short field like this, where he's just not very quick, he may have a really tough time if other horses are just, like, able to get the jump on him and they're able to be a little bit more like positionally forward,
Yeah, I mean, look, we're probably going to have 3 horses running. I mean, I guess the best thing you could say about Post Time is that he's got experience in a 3-horse race. He just won one last time by 17 lengths. He's not going to be 1-20 against this field, unfortunately for him. Gino, I think how this race plays out is going to depend entirely on how much of an advantage Kendrick Carmouche wants to build up on Phileas Fogg at the early stages. Because if he wants to, Kendrick could put 5 lengths on both Locked and Post Time because they just can't go with him early. But in these small fields, we often don't see that happen. And jockeys sometimes try to back down the pace a lot, get to the half in 50, turn it into a sprint to the finish. And I don't like to see that, especially with a horse like Phileas Fogg, whose biggest weapon has been when he can create separation in his races and sort of run the stamina out of his rivals and stay on at the end. We saw him use those tactics to great success when he upset the Suburban 2 back, and even last time in the Jockey Club Gold Cup when the field got strung out and he was able to maybe attain a higher place than a lot of people were expecting him to. But I worry, Kendrick Carmouche is not the kind of jockey to do that, but I do worry in a situation like this that maybe you don't go as fast as you would have in a larger field, and it just brings horses like Locked and Post Time into the race when we know they're stronger finishers than Phileas Fogg.
I would 100% of the time prefer the rides that you just talked about. Stretch them out, use your weapon, because if you keep these horses in the race turning for home, if they're a length or 2 and they're involved, they're going to outkick you. They're fitter than you if those are the horses that you're trying to beat. I always prefer the go, open up, and try to run them off their feet type effort. And shout out to Frank. I saw a clip on social media. I sent to Frank to some of your best work. He was going through every racetrack that he's been at around the country and what pizza place is the best right next to it. And I mean, you just heard him like going through the slices. The Brooklyn slice square. It's a little thicker. I mean, and like, you just hear how passionate he is. I said, man, you've called some good races, but that pizza segment was the best thing you've done.
He is racing's pizza expert for sure. But I'm showing the replay of this Suburban because, I mean, Kendrick has talked about this in interviews that, I mean, he likes to sort of put the hammer down, really, put the pedal to the metal on the far turn of these races. When other jockeys would wait to push the button until the quarter pole, he likes to go before that because he thinks it gives him an advantage to sort of discourage other horses by the time you get into the stretch. And you saw him do this with Phileas Fogg in the Suburban. And, Locked couldn't go at the quickening of the pace around the far turn. He's fading at the end of this race. Antiquarian, I mean, he's coming on at the end, but nearly losing to that horse turned out to not be such a bad thing when Antiquarian came back to upset the Jockey Club Gold Cup next time. So, I mean, take nothing away from Phileas Fogg. He is in the form of his career right now. The big question for me in this race, Gino, is Locked and what you do with him, because he's been disappointing in his last couple of races. I think there are excuses that can be made for him. Personally, I thought the Ali Shiba was, number one, just a weird spot for him because a mile and a 16th is a little short and there was no pace in that race. And it just never seemed like that race was going to set up the right way for him. And when they went to the half in 48 plus and came home the final, half mile in 46, he had no chance to close in that race. The Suburban is a little problematic. I will say, having watched a lot of his workouts all through the spring and summer, I think he's training a lot better coming into this race. So based on that, I'm expecting a better effort, but it's not like he's going to be some great price in here.
No, and I agree with you because you can watch some of his works. I think he is doing a little bit better right now too, David, but I was expecting so much more from him earlier in this year to kind of take a step forward. And I think he could be in a little bit of trouble in a race like this where he has to be the second horse, probably. Like he might have to be the horse in chase mode that tries to go after Phileas Fogg as early as possible. So I just, in a small field like this, I really don't know what to take out of it, but I was expecting a lot more throughout the year from Locke. And I do think I agree with my good buddy, the sniper, who says that he thinks Kendrick needs to just get out and go. And he looks like the goods, especially in this smaller field.
Yeah, I mean, your days of getting a price on Phileas Fogg are probably over in this race.
Yeah.
He's going to be one of the favorites, if not the favorite, now that there are likely to be scratches in here. But no, he's the horse to beat in here. I'll just make one more comment about Locked. I mean, if you watch his recent workouts, you might be unimpressed. And I'll just say Locked is a very lazy workhorse. He has been for a long time. So you'll see him really get asked hard in the mornings. If you go back and watch the workouts before the Suburban, some of them, he was like lazy to a point where it seemed like maybe there was going to be a fitness issue coming into the race. He's been ridden hard in the mornings. I mean, he had a workout with Fierceness back on August 16th. And I mean, you would expect Fierceness to easily outwork Locked, and he did. Fierceness was going much more easily than Locked, but Locked was really kept after by the exercise rider and almost under a whip to get past Fierceness at the end of that workout. So it seems like they're really sort of getting the miles into Locked and making sure that he's at peak fitness for this race. We'll see if he can get him back on track.
Yeah, his scurvy tooth has been checking in. If he can bounce back to that big cap form. Where else would you like to head over at Belmont and Aqueduct?
Let's, I'll just briefly mention the Gallant Bloom. It's not a race that I have a ton of interest in. I went for the number 5 Sterling Silver in here. She's a horse I've been a fan of for a long time. I'm still kind of smarting from when she got taken down in this race. Oh gosh, what was it now? 2 years ago when she was an easy winner. And that was let's say a controversial double disqualification to put up the 3rd place finish. You don't see that too often. And you might think that she's gone off form recently. I do have a little bit of trouble explaining the Johnstone last time. I will say, while her turf race last time might not look so great, I think she's just a better dirt horse than she is a turf horse. And also, that Yaddo was a race that was totally dominated by horses that rode the rail every step of the way. And she never was inside. She tried to make a 3 to 4 wide run off the far turn. So her 4th place finish in that race is actually way better than it looks, considering that she doesn't love the turf and it was the wrong distance. And I think getting back into a dirt sprint, and especially a dirt sprint at this kind of level, she just makes a whole lot of sense. And if some pace develops here, I think she's going to run one of her good races.
Couple horses just to ask you about real quick in here that at one time were very, very highly regarded. First, the number 2, Impel, who comes off of back-to-back victories, going a mile. Now you get the cutback to 6.5 furlongs. What'd you think about this horse in this particular spot for Brad Cox?
Yeah, I did a preview of this race with Mike Beer earlier in the week, and we were having an interesting discussion about this horse and sort of what her ceiling could be. Actually, I'm noticing that since we handicapped this race, they've actually inflated the buyer for that groupie doll. It definitely was not a 90 when I first looked at this race.
Yeah, it was 88 as I'm looking at it from just a few days ago. Yeah.
But look, it was a solid race, and I thought she ran well to get the job done, considering that she was 3 wide with no cover most of the way. And something that we saw in the race 2 back at Churchill was that she responded really well to getting held up behind horses and then being asked to produce a kick once she was angled out into the clear in the stretch. And that was something that I think they hadn't been trying with her in prior races. She had been going longer distances. They had been trying to get her a little bit more forward. And I think some of her stamina deficiencies were exposed in those 2 turn races. I do like her going 1 turn. I like her getting held up behind horses and trying to produce 1 finish. I don't know if she's quite this good as a sprinter, but you're going to find out in this race. And it's not like she's going to be some short price going out for the barn that she does. So I think she's a little interesting. And I imagine the other horse that you were going to mention that had some backclass, Gina, would be the number 8 Senza Parole, who, look, I don't know what to do with her because she was really disappointing last time, losing at a short price at Saratoga, because you expect those Chad Brown horses returning off long layoffs to be ready. And she ran the first half mile of the race like she was ready. She opened up at the top of the stretch and just visibly shortened stride late. Maybe she needed it. And I guess the fact that she's running in a graded stakes now, second off the layoff, is a vote of confidence. But at a short price, I can't bet her in this spot.
Now, Barry mentions Scalable, who could possibly get a trip if they go quick early on. He's looking for a horse to kind of sit back and make one late run. We haven't seen Scalable since really early on in the year. David, any thoughts on this one before we move along?
I mean, she earned a career best buyer in her last race. I was looking up some stats for trainer Todd Pletcher, who, I mean, not a big surprise. He does well off layoffs, but I looked up specifically 6 month or more in dirt graded stakes races. He's winning at over 40%. So that's a good sign for Scalable. Just not sure if I totally trust her to reproduce that last effort with there being so much time in between races.
And we can move along to the Vosburg if you'd like, or unless you have anything else you want to hit on here.
Let's go on to the Vosburg, because I think this is a more interesting race among these two dirt sprints, at least from my perspective.
Yeah.
Look, the horses coming out of the Forgo are definitely getting class relief. I mean, there's no Bookham Dano in here. And while maybe Bookham Dano didn't run his A race in the Forgo, that was still a tough field. And I think you've got to respect the efforts that Scotland and Crazy Mason put in. I'm just a little concerned about the trips that a few of these horses are going to work out, because I don't see that much speed in this field.
Yeah, and I think Scotland, I can tell you from experience, was probably a horse that you felt like you wanted to bet last time at that price when he ran really well, because it seemed like the type of race where Bookham Dano could regress a little bit. He kind of did on speed figures based on what he was doing. And if you liked Scotland that day, you sort of had the right horse in the right race with the right idea that day. And now he's going to be not 11-1. He's going to be a very short price. He draws the rail with his running style. I'm a little bit worried about the shuffle back type of trip he could get in here. And I mean, if he and Crazy Mason were similar prices, I would just prefer Crazy Mason going the 7 furlongs in a race where I think there's a little bit more speed if he's on the outside with maybe more of a clear journey. So just from the top horses that might get bet in here, I think it actually is not a bad spot for this guy.
I love Crazy Mason as a horse. He is one of my favorite horses that is currently racing. I'm a sucker for deep closers like this, especially horses that do it in dirt sprints. His last race was good. Look, I liked him in the Forgo. He ran as well as I could have expected. The race was coming apart at the end. He just lacked the raw talent to get there at the very end of the race. You could see it sort of flattened out in the final eighth of a mile. But he put forth one of his good efforts in there. And actually, I can actually pull up the stretch run of the Forgo as we're talking about these three horses that are exiting there. I do worry a little bit, Gino, that he just has no early speed, and I don't see a whole lot of pace in this race. I certainly see less than there was in the Forgo last time, and I'm just a little concerned that even with the class relief, it's not going to set up ideally for him. And while we're watching this race, I just want to give a shout out to Doc Sullivan, who's also
that's who I was going to ask you about next.
I mean, well, why don't you mention? Because I thought his trip in the Forgo was maybe a little underrated.
Yeah, and I would love to see him with more of an inside draw in here, try to get in front of the horses that we're talking about in Scotland and in Crazy Mason, because Doc Sullivan can be more forward. If you just look at the race 2 starts back in the Morrissey where he was sitting closer, and they were going slower so he could sit a little bit closer. But the point is, he didn't need to be quite as far back as he was there. He was a little bit wide, and he just couldn't sustain the move with Scotland and Crazy Mason. I'm hoping, David, that this time he gets the jump on them a little bit more than he did last time.
I think it's certainly possible. And those two horses did make wide runs from the top of the stretch home, Crazy Mason and Scotland. They saved a lot of ground before that coming around the turn. Whereas Doc Sullivan, he was wide almost every step of the way, and he was never giving up at the end. And this is a horse that I'm very familiar with, having competed through all the New York bred ranks as a younger horse. I mean, he just rarely runs a bad race. He can be frustrating at times because he is a difficult horse to ride. He wants to lug in. Sometimes he's bad with his lead changes, but it does feel like he's sorted a lot of that stuff out. since the trainer switched to John Ortiz, and also I think more importantly since the jockey switch to Joel Rosario, who seems like he's really getting along with this horse well. So I certainly respect him in this race. But I was mentioning the pace scenario. I mean, I'll pull up the pace projector briefly. It's not characterizing it as a favors frontrunner situation, but I will note that we did see reporting that the number 3 Super Chow will be coming out of this race. He's running in a different spot out of town. So that takes a big pace player out of the race. And I mean, you look at the other 2 horses that are showing forward. I mean, Nash has a little tactical speed, but I don't really view him as a front runner, Gino. And I mean, I think the other horse that's shown forward in this race just makes a whole lot of sense. The number 8 Patriot Spirit. Yeah. He's been one that I think has a little tough for his connections to figure out because they've been going back and forth between routes and sprints for a lot of his career. And he's actually run some pretty strong races going 2 turns in some unfavorable pace situations, particularly I'm looking at the time form USP piece. If you go 3 starts back to that Essex at Oaklawn, I mean, those are just some huge time form US pace figures that he was contesting through the early part of that race. So no surprise that he got tired at the end and faded to 4th. But
and no surprise that Red Route 1 won the race, right? You know that when it's going to set up for Red Route Run, that they're probably lining up on the lead early on and going pretty quick.
And Gino, if I recall, I believe you liked Red Route Run in that race. So that's so probably a fond memory for you, especially coming off the past couple months.
I need some of that. Absolutely. Yes. But shout out to Eric too, who's going to get a little crazy. He's thinking about singling Nash in a late pick 5 that could pay stacks if you were to do so, Eric. And maybe you could see Nash getting a forward trip in a race where there's not that much early speed. That's kind of what you're shooting for, right, David, with Patriot Spirit?
Totally. And I think Nash is going to be forward in this race because he's done well when they've sent him aggressively in the past. I know they haven't done it the last couple of times, but those were faster paced races than he's likely to encounter here. So yeah, let's actually touch upon Nash in a second. But I mean, I'll finish up Patriot Spirit. He turned back to the 7 furlongs last time at Colonial. It was a much weaker field than this. That was a visually impressive win. This horse has always had talent. I think the 7 furlongs is perfect for him. I love that he's drawn outside of the other speed. And we'll see what price he is, with the other speed coming out. Maybe his price drops a little bit, but I could make the case that he's the most likely winner of this race, given the way it's going to set up. So he's the one that I wanted.
What would your value line be on him to make a win wager? What would you take?
I'm going to say 3-1.
Yeah, that sounds right.
Given the trip that I'm envisioning him getting, I think he's about 25% to win this race. I mean, I wish I could say Crazy Mason was a higher percentage to win. I with my heart, I would go for that, but I just don't see him getting the right trip in this race.
No, how many variables for him?
With Nash, he's got the highest buyer in the race. When you go into Formulator and look at that race, you can pull up the buyer speed figures for all of the horses coming in and out of the race. And it does kind of stick out that the 2 horses that earned those triple-digit numbers came back in subsequent starts and significantly regressed, as did the 3rd place finisher, Discreet Mischief. So I got some concerns about the validity of that figure or its predictive value moving forward. But it's not like Nash doesn't have other mid-90s buyers that makes him competitive here, and he's probably going to get a good trip towards the front end. So I was sort of against him when I first went through this race, but I understand there's an argument for him.
We always have to mention Baby Yoda as a horse who he shows up with some huge performances from time to time, David. But I'm not sure coming into this race if I was as high on him as Barry. What did you think about Baby Yoda?
I mean, he's going out for a new barn for the first time since, 2021, when he was privately acquired off a couple of starts out at Pimlico. Look, the prior connections had a ton of success with him. He's earned, over $1 million. He's popped some triple-digit buyers that would make him very competitive in this race, sporadically throughout his career. I feel like his recent form at the graded stakes level leaves a little bit to be desired. And while he did adapt well to a less than ideal start last time, this is a way tougher spot than that one. And he's not for me in this race, but I know he's got his fans.
Some trailers out for The Mandalorian and Grogu. That movie, I believe, should be coming out next year for all of you Baby Yoda fans. David, anything else you want to hit on over at Belmont and Aqueduct?
No, I mean, I like this mandatory pick five sequence. I think it's races 5 through 9 because, as we talked about, they're not big fields, but you can probably craft a pretty affordable ticket if you've got some
Yeah.
opinions through these races. So I think that's a very playable sequence for a lot of people. Things will get much more difficult later in the card, but we won't go through those non-stakes races. There are some large fields at the end of the day, but I'll have analysis in plenty of other places if people want to check that out. So why don't we continue with the stakes action, Gino, and want to move over to Santa Anita?
Yeah, let's check it out over there. They have 5 graded stakes races at Santa Anita. I think it starts with the City of Hope Mile in the 4th, where Johannes will be there. And I think a lot of you have probably seen over the last few days, they're promoting some of the new wagers at the Santa Anita Autumn Meet, which I like the new style of wagers that First Racing and Santa Anita and Gulfstream and a lot of the tracks are starting to lean into, David. They had the $3 pick threes, which are nice. They're higher minimums. They have the $5 doubles, which are also, so if you're someone who, doesn't want to play a pick 6 or a pick 5, sometimes they're too challenging, especially if it's a dollar-based minimum. It can be really tough to narrow down in some races and you have to play a bigger ticket. They give you doubles, pick 3s, and then there's the coast to coast pick 5, and now a sunset pick 6. That'll be the final 3 races. Gulfstream, Santa Anita, every day they race, 15% takeout, dollar minimum. I like these style much more than the 50 cents, the 20-cent ones, because that's when things get diluted a little too much.
Yeah, I mean, look, it's better optics because let's just be honest about it. When we pay out trifectas in 50-cent increments, people always think they look short because they're playing them for a lower denomination because when you can use more horses, you use more horses and you end up playing for the 50 cents rather than $2 like you might have in the past. And you're going to get less money back because you're probably playing a less efficient ticket. So, I mean, from a mathematical standpoint, I was kind of initially like, all right, sure, we'll have higher minimums. It'll make it seem like you're getting more money. But I actually think in practice, it really is good for the players because it makes you play more efficient tickets.
Absolutely.
And you don't end up using a lot of horses that you don't really like. And when you're playing, let's say, a $3 minimum pick 3, you've got to make some more difficult decisions and cut out some horses that maybe you wanted to use defensively, and you have to sort of maybe single a horse that you really like, which is a smarter way to play in the long run. And you might have a lower hit rate, but you're going to make more meaningful scores that way. So I think it does push people in a direction of healthier wagering by increasing those minimums. And actually, Gino, I like this. I think it's the $3 late pick 3 over the last 3 races this day at Santa Anita. So we could talk about some strategy when we get there. But I mean, we could quickly move through these first 2 turf races on the card because, they're smaller fields. And I think you've got some heavy favorites in these races, particularly with Johannes in the City of Hope Mile.
Yeah, and what are we going to do with Johannes, who was off for all of this year, shipped over to Saratoga, had some legitimate trouble going into the first turn, bounced around, but late in the race really showed nothing. So I kind of go back and forth because I completely agree that the trouble was legitimate. This horse was bumped all around, did not have comfortable first furlong or so in this race, but didn't really show very much after that at all. Are you okay with just completely wiping this race out after that early trouble?
I am. I mean, you could see it here. He's the number 3 horse in those pinkish silks. I mean, he's just getting into a world of trouble. I mean, he didn't get forward early, and then Umberto Rispoli got a little shuffled back from there, and then the horse gets ranked. I mean, he is steadied multiple times
for a while.
That clubhouse turn, and then he gets a little rank after that. Yet, knowing how these races on the inner turf at Saratoga play out, Gino, you've got a little bit of trouble early, and your race is often over when you're out of position. So I am willing to be pretty forgiving of him for this effort. And at the end of the day, he's just got an entire resume of races that'll beat this field.
Absolutely.
So I personally am not looking to get too creative in this race and trying to beat him. I'm kind of hoping he gets back on track because he's a fun American representative to have in the Breeders' Cup Mile. He obviously ran so well in this race last year, so we'll see if he can get back to that form. But I do believe he had a pretty legitimate excuse last time.
And I think of this race as like 2 races, because if Johannes shows up with even like a B- type effort, as you were pointing out, I think that's good enough to win. If he doesn't, the rest of the field, there's like 4 of these horses that are actually kind of competitive between Zio Joe and Final Boss and Almendares and Cover Spirit, that would kind of be a race in itself. I think Scooby Quando looks like a little bit overmatched. The one that if you are looking to play against a horse and you're playing any kind of exotically, I think Zio Joe might get a nice trip inside just the way this race plays out. If he can sit third and maybe try to make a move early and get the jump on Johannes, he's run some big races not far behind some of these others. And I think he's just going to be a way bigger price than a horse like Almendares might be in here. So he's the horse who I think, even if you want to hook him up with Johannes and Exactas or something like that, he could offer you some really nice value.
Sure. Yeah. I'm not going to talk anybody off anybody underneath in this race. I just feel like Johannes, I mean, I know people like to pick on Rispoli. He's had his time in the spotlight this year, and maybe, you can nitpick some of the rides he gave journalism, and, the 4-star Dave just adds some fuel to the fire, but he does ride the turf pretty well out west. I'm not expecting the same thing to happen this time with Johannes.
And he hasn't done a whole lot wrong on this particular horse through the years. He's always given him really good rides. So he knows him very well. And I think he'll bounce back. And like you said, I hope he does. And with some of these horses, like a horse like him, if he does, it doesn't really, it's not going to mean what happened last time is nothing, but going into the Breeders' Cup, if he comes off of a win here, just like he did last year, he'd feel fine heading in there with kind of home court advantage again and another race down at Del Mar.
Yeah, totally. I mean, it just feels like a race where you want to see him allow his talent to shine and maybe turn the page, because there are a lot of better wagering opportunities later on this card. And
the late three. In particular. We can glance at the 6th for sure. Yeah.
I want to just mention this race. I know I don't think you did a stakes preview of this one, so I don't know how deep of a dive you did, but I'll just pose it this way. Am I crazy to think that Balladeer can finally get back to form? Because I know this horse looks like he is a shadow of what he once was, but I just think that they have tried a bunch of the wrong races this year. He does not want to go 1.5 miles, or let alone farther than that. And they've run him 1.75 miles and 2+ miles in 2 of his last 3 races. That's just way too far for him. The Eddie Reed 2-back, they rated him off another horse that wanted to show
and those
speed.
Are cross outs when he's rating. We just want him on the lead, loose on the lead.
He cannot rate and have any success whatsoever. He needs to be in front. So he got the right kind of trip, or at least he's satisfied being in front at the right distance, those 2 conditions when he tried the Charles Whittingham back in May. But that was a fast pace. And Kent Sommer was on that day. It didn't look like he was interested in taking a hold of this horse at all. He let him rattle along on the front end. He went too fast and actually battled back pretty gamely at the end, but just couldn't see out that race given how quickly he went early. And you go back to some of his form from last season or early last season. I mean, he's run some races that make him very competitive with this field. They're putting the blinkers back on, which says to me, okay, we realize he can't rate. We're getting back to front running tactics. He's always run best at Santa Anita, has always done best at 1.25 miles. And I just think he's a horse that a lot of people are going to be totally done with by this point. And I respect Gold Phoenix. From a raw talent standpoint, I'm never afraid to take a shot against Gold Phoenix. And I just think this is the right kind of race to try Balladeer again.
Because there's a lot of horses in this race that you sort of can eliminate handicapping and feel like they don't have as legitimate of a chance. I think for most people, it's probably a 2-horse race between Stay Hot and Gold Phoenix. Both of those horses are not as fast as Balladeer is early. And this is absolutely the situation where Balladeer gets clear. The rest of the field and the rest of the riders are more concerned with where Gold Phoenix is than where Balladeer is. And they're worried about making that move and kind of waiting, or trying to get the jump on Gold Phoenix. And this is a horse who sneaks away. So I completely agree. I think the 2 outside horses are the most likely winners of this race.
Sure.
But this is the race that's ripe for an upset when you have just a couple that look like they're real logical contenders. And then you have a horse like Balladeer who has a major pace advantage on this group. So, I mean, he's a horse who 2 different times, it seems like he was just getting ready to become like a real force in races like this in Southern California. And you're right. Then it was like they would take the wrong route. He would be sitting off a horse for a couple starts in a row. He's going 2 miles at Kentucky Downs last time out. This is just a race that's much more in his wheelhouse.
Yeah, and horses like this can wire the field when the other jockeys and connections stop respecting them. And I think this horse has lost a lot of
Great
respect, and
point.
maybe they let him go up front this time. We'll see. It remains to be seen if he's still good enough at this stage of his career, but at the price he's going to be, he's just a horse early in the day that I've got to take a shot with. But I mean, let's move on to the other stakes that end this card, specifically that late pick 3, because I know you had some interest in the Eddie D, and
Yep.
I did some looking into this race, and I agree with you. There's a lot to discuss in here.
Yeah, I think it's a competitive race, and I think the horses that are the short prices on the morning line, you can poke a few holes in, and that's always a race that I think ends up a little competitive. We could start with the one Reef Runner, who is a horse who comes out of a very unlucky disqualification. He was in the green flash, and he drew towards the outside, and he came over a little bit on Motorius, and Motorius is not a horse that's quick early to begin with. He's just slow out of the gate. So a lot of horses are probably going to come over on Motorius, who just doesn't want to hit those holes early on. He got disqualified for what happened in the start. And we're starting to see this happen more often, David, but this is something that almost never happened in racing. For right there, he gets DQ'd for what ends up happening. And he gets over to the rail, and this horse flies up the inside and gets up to win. I'm against him going down the hill because he really does look like a 5 furlong horse. And the 5 furlong turf course at Del Mar is such a world different than the 6.5 down the hill at Santa Anita. And I think there were a couple other horses in this race that we're watching, like the number 1, who is going to fly up behind Reef Runner. That's actually Beyond Brilliant, who's going to be the 6 in the race on Saturday. This was a 5 furlong race. That's too short for Beyond Brilliant. Beyond Brilliant is a horse with some back class that could probably much prefer 6.5. So while Reef Runner crossed the wire first in here, I do think you may take a couple horses out of this race that could be better suited going down the hill. One of them I mentioned in Beyond Brilliant, and then the other to the outside was First Piece. They were both horses that were behind in that race, but they are way better 6.5 furlong horses, David.
I completely agree with all of that, all of your trip observations about the green flash. I echo those sentiments. I won't rehash everything with Reef Runner, but yeah, he's a 5 furlong specialist, and he's not for me in this spot. And also, we should mention, Gino, I guess Paco Lopez will not be able to fill his mounts on Saturday at Santa Anita. And that's something to keep in mind moving through these races, because he had some very live mounts through, I think, all of these stakes. So we'll see who the replacements are, but just something to keep in mind. He gave Reef Runner such a great ride last time, regardless of that DQ. Beyond Brilliant's fascinating, because obviously, look, they started him in sprint races on the turf, and then they stretched him out. He had success. They stuck with the route races. But he was always a horse that wasn't the strongest finisher, and he kind of lost his finish through the early part of this year when he returned from that very long layoff. But he did show signs of life last time, and I agree. I mean, there was a point in upper stretch when Reef Runner came over on him, and Beyond Brilliant had to pause a little bit. He lost momentum, but he was really flying across the wire. I think 6.5, like you said, could be perfect for him. And he's probably not going to be that short a price in this race. And the tougher call for me, Gino, was the number 8 First Piece. Because, I mean, he had the long layoff to deal with last time. He was obviously flat. I mean, he lacked early speed. He was wide around the turn and got pushed out really wide by Motorius at the top of the stretch, but he had no closing kick whatsoever to offer. But it did kind of feel like he needed that race, and Mike Smith kind of rode him like he needed the race. So I'm not going to be surprised when he does a lot better here.
Yeah, all 6 of his races down the hill have been in the money. He won the Eddie D last year, so perhaps they were just priming him to get a race at Del Mar, set him up for this one, and then maybe can get one more point at the Breeders' Cup, or just point for some other races at Santa Anita following that, because he's a horse that likes the downhill turf course. I'll ask you about one more horse in this race, David. The 2, Nesso's Last Hurrah, I think is a little bit interesting. This is a lightly raced horse who's not done a whole lot wrong. And if you look at the last 8 races, he's won 5 of them with a couple seconds in a third. He has speed. He can sit off the pace a little bit. That race at Los Alamitos 2 starts back, if you're wondering how strong it was, the winner of that race, See Through It, came right back to win next out, an optional claimer, non-winners of 2 at Del Mar with a 96 buyer speed figure. So kind of franked that form was not bad at all. I think this horse has some options. I really like Hector Barrios aboard him. And for these horses that show a little bit of speed going a mile, they generally fit very well in the 6.5 at Santa Anita. I would not be shocked at all to see this horse run well, third start of the form cycle.
No, I mean, he's an up-and-comer in this race. He's a little unproven at this graded stakes level,
Yep.
but his form is heading in the right direction, as you said. And I mean, he's run well at those distances shorter than 6.5 and longer, so it feels like this could be right for him. And it's not like there's a ton of speed in this field, so he could get the right trip towards the front end. I'm not going to talk you off that horse, Gino, and I think you're going to get a lot better than 9-2 on him.
I agree.
I mean,
and I want that. I want 6-ish,
yeah,
7, in that range on him. Because I think, like you said, he's not proven at this level. So you do have some questions about how classy he really is. But I think he has some speed as a weapon. He's up and coming, lightly raced. And I thought there were, maybe 3 or 4 different horses you could make cases for. I know Mike Beer has always been a fan of Kale's Angel. He makes cases for this horse at a big price.
Oh, that's right. He loves that horse.
Yeah, quite often. We did the preview the other day. And even a horse like Mucho Del Oro has not been in great of form, David. But last year, this horse would have been really tough in a spot like this. He's a multiple graded stakes winner, and he's run very well down the hill. He's most likely the quickest in here.
I will say that race on April 26th, when I watched the replay, he got a ridiculous trip in there. He was rated behind a slow pace, got shut off and shuffled back at the top of the stretch. So nothing went right for him that day. If that was his only poor recent effort, I'd be very willing to excuse it. I wish some of his surrounding form was a little stronger, but new barn, layoff, maybe he's going to turn things around here. We'll see. And Gino, we probably should mention the number 5 Yellow Card, who is another horse that showed some talent last year, was second in that Franklin Simpson.
Your favorite grade 1?
Don't give me reason to get on the soapbox because we still have handicapping to do. But look, he showed talent last year, and the 2 starts so far this season, he's not gotten back to those top speed figures that we saw from him as a 3-year-old, but it did kind of feel like those races at Del Mar might have been a means to an end. I think a little longer than 5 furlongs actually suits him.
Yeah.
So I think he's very intriguing in this race. He's another one. I would want a little more than 7-2 on him, just given the improvement he needs to find as a 4-year-old. But if he is 5 or 6-1 in this race, sign me up.
Yeah, he has speed. He sat closer in his last couple races too than he had been doing more recently. So he just seems really versatile. And I agree with you. I don't mind him as much going 6.5 as a horse like Reef Runner, who I'm really against going 6.5. I think he could play out fine here and get a really nice trip. And when you start talking through the field and you can kind of make cases for 4 or 5 different horses in here, I think the money could be spread out a little bit. And, if you have a strong opinion, you'll probably have some nice value in a couple different spots.
Yeah, and I guess Sorrento Sky is going to win because he's the only horse that we didn't mention in this race.
Exactly. Yeah, I know. He's been well down the hill, but he was just flat last time. Like he didn't really have many excuses in that race.
Yeah, and I mentioned earlier that I have some interest in playing this $3 late pick 3. The horses that I'd be leaning toward using in this leg would be the 5, 6, and 8. Yellow Card, Beyond Brilliant, and First Piece. But luckily, this is the first leg, so you get to take a look at the tote board. So obviously, you can adjust things based on the price.
Yeah, those are pretty much the same horses on my radar, along with the 2, depending on who I would use and how I structure the tickets. A couple more graded stakes races at Santa Anita. The grade 1 Goodwood is next, and we don't have any of the heavy hitters from the Pacific Classic, right? In that race, it was supposed to be the big 3 where we had Fierceness ship in, Journalism step up and face older, and Nisos was in there. Well, Nisos got hurt. I think he just came back and worked the other day, and it seems like if he ends up going into a Breeders' Cup race, it'll be either the sprint or the dirt mile, because he's never been a mile and a quarter. Right? He's not going to try to go the Breeders' Cup Classic off of, that no real prep going, no opportunity to go that distance. So in this race, David, it's a little bit interesting because the 2 horses to start with are First Mission, the 4, who has been a really solid graded stakes horse over the last couple of years. And if you look at the start of his season this year, his first 3 races, I have no problem with those races. There's nothing really surprising about them to me. His first start in the Razorback, he was a little bit short that day. His first start since August of 2024. He steps up and wins the Oaklawn Handicap. And then he's third behind Mindframe and Sierra Leone, who might be the 2 best older horses, or certainly 2 of the top, whatever short list you want to say. it was that last race when he's the heavy favorite at Monmouth Park. And there's just really no excuses for him in there. Like, he wasn't really moving comfortably for a lot of that race. He was kind of being asked like a lot just to kind of stay and keep that advantage. And so it's really tough to play a horse who's going to be a short price coming off of an effort like this.
Yeah, I mean, I'm pulling up the replay here. I mean, you could see at this point in the race, it looks like, okay, he's going to reel in Repo Rocks, but I mean, the overachiever surface to air sort of makes this blitz on the turn, and it seems like First Mission is just totally unprepared for the challenge he receives here. And you could see Florent Giroux kind of panics a little bit. He goes to the whip. He's trying to get this horse to find more. And it's like he can never regain the momentum and match that move. And I like that he never throws in the towel and gives up in this race. He sticks with surface to air to the wire. But he's supposed to beat that horse based on his resume. I'm kind of wondering if Brad Cox is a little sick of sending these odds-on horses to Monmouth, because it feels like he's been beaten with a few of them. I mean, even Idiomatic almost got upset when he sent her to Monmouth last summer for the Molly Pitcher. So, yeah, I mean, he's had some disappointments there. Monmouth can be a quirky track, and it was pretty dead and slow on the day that they ran the Island. Still, First Mission is a horse that I am never afraid to take on at a short price, because as you were kind of laying out his season so far, yeah, he's run well. He's got some triple-digit buyers, but he does not win often enough to justify the short prices that he just routinely goes off at. And, Gino, they have to run him in this race, because what does he have left in his career? At most 2 races if they're running in the Breeders' Cup. And he is still lacking a grade 1 win in his resume. Godolphin wants him to be a stallion. This isn't conjecture. Brad Cox has said this explicitly in interviews before this race, that they want a grade 1 win with this horse. And this is kind of the last opportunity for him to get one, because I think even Brad Cox knows this horse is not winning a Breeders' Cup race.
And while we're sounding like we're both against him on the win end, I mean, it is a great spot for him. It very much reminds me of when Safi sent out Skippy Longstocking earlier in the Gulf. And you just get a spot where he's very much the most accomplished horse in this race overall. When you look at his body of work the last few years, Full Serrano to the outside is the Breeders' Cup Dirt Mile winner. And he's the other horse, David, that I think is going to take a lot of money. And he is really, really fast and capable of some big performances. Like we saw last year, he got backed up this year, and his first start of the year was on September the 1st, but I mean, it was like a paid workout. He just toyed with that field, and you could tell that it didn't take a whole lot out of him, because that was on September the 1st. He came back and he was already working on September the 14th, just 13 days later, with a couple of works to get himself ready for this one. So he's drawn really well to the outside too. If anyone inside of him wants to go, with 3 Bafferts in here, do you think one of the Baffert horses ends up getting sent to try to soften this horse up a little bit? And could they even do that if they wanted to?
I mean, that would make sense, I guess, but I don't know if any of them have the natural speed to go with Full Serrano. I mean, he set some pretty quick paces in his last couple of starts. I know sometimes those first couple of fractions going the 1 mile distance at Del Mar can seem faster than they really are, because they've got such a long run up for that race. But still, I mean, he's fast. He's quick out of the gate. He's drawn outside. I'm sure the Juan Hernandez is going to look to cross over and discourage anybody else from going into that clubhouse turn. So I think he's supposed to get the right trip for him, and he's going to be tough in this race. I guess the one concern with him, Gino, is 9 furlongs, second off a layoff where he didn't have to work that hard in his return. Are we at all concerned about fitness or how far this horse really wants to go? Because yes, he just missed in the Pacific Classic back in 2024. That Pacific Classic was one of the weaker editions we've ever seen in that race. So I don't know if I really view that as evidence that he can get 10 furlongs. And he's only got to get 9 here. But I do kind of view him as a miler that can stretch his speed this far. So if somebody else shows up, like if First Mission shows up with this good race, I think he can beat this horse. I just trust Full Serrano a little bit more to run his A race on Saturday.
And I actually would like to see him win this race just to get into the Breeders' Cup Classic. Have a speed horse like this get in there, because he just having if he wins impressively and they decide to go there, he is a horse that just throws a wrench into pace scenarios and could maybe make it more fair for some of the deeper closers if things get honest. Like last year, they were flying in the Breeders' Cup Classic. I think he might just be a fun horse to go in there. And would they even do that? Maybe they would think it was too tough and try to go back and win the Dirt Mile again like they did last year. The horse in here that I'm a little bit interested in, David, I'm curious how he gets bet, is Nevada Beach of the Bafferts, and just in particular, if I'm looking to bet this race at all, because he is a horse who has raced 3 times. All 3 of them are fine. He lost in the Affirmed. It was a 4-horse field. He got behind Gaming that day, and it was just one of those instances where he had nothing he could do about that. I actually liked, and you're pulling it up right here, where he kind of got down on the inside, and it just, at this point, nobody's challenging Gaming, and you know, he ran fine to finish second there. He's actually been working in the morning on First.TV with Privman, who's in this race, and I think he's been working better than Privman in the mornings, and I can see him being, he's fine at 1 1/8. We just saw him get, you know, win at 1 1/8 at Los Alamitos last time out. He's still a little bit green when you watch him. And I actually like that for a lightly raced horse like this with a trainer like Bob Baffert. He does so well at like fixing those little quirks early in the morning with some of these lightly raced horses. He doesn't have to be that far back either, but he can finish. I prefer him to either of the other Bafferts. And when I start going like process of elimination in this race, and I was looking at horses who could be bettable, you know, Gaming I don't really like. I don't think Ultimate Gamble is quite classy enough for a group like this. Talked about Privman. He's still a little quirky. And I think Nevada Beach in the mornings has been better. And I kind of like the trip Nevada Beach could sit in here. We just mentioned the 2 short prices, and Express Train. I think I misspoke earlier today, and Scott corrected me. I said Express Train hasn't won a graded stakes since 2010. I meant he was over his last 10. It wasn't quite that far back.
You're not that far off, Gino.
2022. But when you, sometimes races, I'll do that where you kind of start eliminating horses who their price isn't going to be playable. You don't think they're going to get the trip. And then you round yourself back to like 1 or 2 horses who look like they're playable. For me, that's Nevada Beach in this race. And I think he could be a really nice price.
Yeah, and I'll just say, as we're finishing up the latter portion of this, if you're watching and you want us to pull something up in the PPs, a replay or a trainer stat, or look something up in the charts, just shoot us a comment and we can pull it right up on screen and look things up in real time. That's one of the beauties of doing this. But yeah, Gino, I agree. If there's a Baffert horse that I want in this race, it is Nevada Beach. I don't know if you're going to get 12 to 1 on him. I don't think you're looking for 12 to 1. No. But he does feel like the one of the 3 Bafferts that still has the most upside. And yeah, I've actually been watching several of his recent workouts. I agree with you about the last one with Privman. He was actually working with Goal Oriented before Goal Oriented ran in the Pennsylvania Derby last weekend. And he ran okay. He was 3rd. I think he got a 99 buyer. But I had mentioned, I think when we did this show last week, that I didn't love the workouts for Goal Oriented because it felt like he was having to work a little bit too hard in company with Nevada Beach, who on paper seemed like an inferior horse. So, I mean, I imagine that's what gave Baffert some confidence to enter Nevada Beach in this race, because it does look a little ambitious for him. I do wonder if Baffert sort of has nowhere else to run these horses, Gino, and he just kind of has to put them all in the race. It's a little bit like what we sometimes see with Staffy Joseph at Gulfstream these days, where he's got 4 or 5 horses and he just has to run them all in a stakes race because there's nowhere else to run. So I wonder how high the expectations are with any of these horses that Baffert has in the Goodwood. But I do think Nevada Beach has talent, and we'll see if he can improve enough. I'm not quite as into him as you are, but he is the one I would want of those 3.
Should we mention Privman at least for our old DRF colleague, Jay Privman? This horse hasn't really done much wrong, but we talked about him a while back. He's quirky. He lugs in. He's a little bit green still, and he's still figuring things out.
I won't use the word to describe what he did last time that a lot of social media users were utilizing to describe the move he made at the very end of that race, because I know Jay didn't like that once I used that in the past. But look, he's a horse that has really improved without a distance. He gives you the vibe when you watch him run that the longer they write races, the better he'll be. I still feel like I would love to see him on the turf one day. I know it's kind of ridiculous to say that about a horse that ran a 97 buyer on dirt last time, but I mean, his dam was a turf horse. When you watch him run, to me, he's got this big floating turf stride by Justify. It's not the kind of horse Baffert's going to run on the turf. I think if he was in a different stable, he would have started out on the turf and had a different career. But at this level, Gino, I don't know if he's quite ready for it yet, because he's been a little green in his last couple of races. He lugged in pretty dramatically in the stretch of his last 2 starts at Del Mar. I don't know if it's something about the stretch of Del Mar that distracts this horse, but I just don't like to see tendencies like that with a horse that is about to take on the toughest test of his career.
Because you can do that against horses that you're better than. You can play around with these types of horses, but you have to be as efficient as possible when you're stepping up and taking on horses like he's going to be facing on Saturday. And I mean, right here, he looks done as the one is kind of past him. So he is game and he does fight back, but you just can't make those types of mistakes at the highest level against really good competition.
And Gino, we'll move on from this race in a second. I just want to mention, I think Express Trade is not out of this race by any means. And actually, the more I looked at this race, the more I started to warm up to Express Train as an actual win candidate. And I know it seems ridiculous to say that because he hasn't won a race since 2010, 15 years ago. But right. Look at the patterns that this horse has going. He obviously missed a lot of time between 2022 and 2024, had an issue that kept him out of the races for a long, long time. John Sheriff's tried to get him some momentum going when he ran him in the sprint race, the Coda Gold back in 2024, ran a little better in the San Diego. Obviously, another issue popped up. He missed 5 months after that, came back in the wintertime of 2024, and he got him into this 3-race cycle where he didn't run that well in the Pink Eye, a little better in the San Pasquale, and then he ran in that Santa Anita handicap, where if you take Locked out of that race, Express Train would have been a legitimate big cap winner, beating Hit Show by over 3 lengths, who did come back to win the Dubai World Cup in his next start. Express Train didn't just luck into second. He made a big move on the far turn to take that race over, and there was not a horse in the country that was beating Locked that day. And then he had some time off. And now Sheriff's got him back in another 3-race cycle, where he gave him a race off the layoff in San Diego. It looked like a prep, made a backstretch move, was never really in position to win. Then they tried the 7-furlong Pat O'Brien last time, where he ran surprisingly well. For a horse that you never really view as a sprinter, he was right there at the end, despite covering way more ground than anybody else, going wide on the turns. And now he's landing in a race, Gino, where I don't trust First Mission. Full Serrano's the horse to beat. I feel like he's pretty obvious, and I don't need a short price on him. Look, I think a 20-1 morning line on Express Train is ridiculous. He's not going to be 20-1. He shouldn't be. I think he should be maybe 10-1 in this race.
Double digits.
But he's got a race 3 starts back when he was in the exact same pattern that he'll be in on Saturday that I think makes him a potential win candidate. So that's the kind of horse that I've got to play. So I think I just talked myself into Express Train.
You probably talked a few other people into it too. Sharpened up the speed last time out in that 7-furlong race. So maybe he could just sit a little bit closer. And then when he angled out, he looked like his trip, like he was just going to flatten out. And he kept grinding and grinding and grinding. And you know, at 7 furlongs, he's going to keep coming. And he has no problem with this distance moving forward in a race where you don't trust some of the shorter prices, or you just don't want to take short prices in here. You're looking around for a big horse, a big price horse who's accomplished, who can certainly win big races over this track. Absolutely. He's a horse who I think I might throw into some of my late exotics now at a big price.
Let's move on to this John C. Harris so we can let our wonderful producer Lucia go at some point. We're going a little over time tonight, and we thank Lucia for sticking with us for these and facilitating these. She does an amazing job as our video producer.
This is another one of those days, David, too, where Lucia heard me in the morning recording some previews. She heard me doing the Sports Grid show, an hour with Miguel Clement, another hour plus here. She's going to have me in her nightmares tonight. I am sorry, Lucia, and anyone at Lucia's house having dinner with her that might hear me in the background.
We can't go through everybody in this race, Gino, because this is a very intriguing 13-horse field where there are cases to be made for a lot of these runners. I think you would agree with me that Warming and Kosselu are kind of the logical horses that I would imagine will be the top 2 choices in the betting. And I'm not really against either one of them. I just thought there were some other horses at better prices you could highlight here. Completely
agree. But either one of them wouldn't shock me. I think they're the next tier of horses that might be in that like between 5 and 10-1-ish range. There's a couple of those horses that I think are very, very logical. One of them, David, is the 4 Innovative, who was a winner on August the 9th over at Del Mar. Just a really nice trip just behind the leaders, angled around, just looked like a pro in doing it. And all this filly's races have been at a mile or slightly above a mile. And in almost all of her races, she's been forward. She's shown the ability to either go on the lead or sit close and pass horses. And she's actually one of a couple that come out of here. And I think they're both live, both Innovated and Eiffel, who was also in that race. Eiffel had a little bit of trouble there. And then last time, David, Eiffel got caught down on the inside in a really bad spot in a race where there was no speed at all. It was won by a big, big long shot that day. And if you watch Eiffel in the mornings, I know this is down the hill on the turf, it's very different. She just looks in the mornings when you've watched her like she's a really talented filly. Mm-hmm. And I'm kind of waiting for a big performance from her. I'm just a little worried that she gets bet because we've seen her get bet in her last couple races. And if she is, 8-1-ish, 6-8-1, I think that's very fair. Those are two of the horses that might be in that price range I was talking about that I think are very logical.
No, it's the kind of race where I'm not going to talk you off anybody because there are cases to be made for a lot of horses, and it's difficult to put the puzzle pieces together because a lot of these horses are coming in from different directions that they're stretching out or turning back. I'll just mention some different horses, Gino. Look, there's one horse if there's one horse that I really want to bet in this race and sort of key things around, or maybe even try to get alive to in that $3 pick 3 sequence, it's the number 8 Favor to You, who I just think is finally getting to do what she really wants to do, and that's go 6.5 furlongs on the turf. I know she's never gone down the hill, but I really liked her debut race, even though she lost it going the 6.5 around the flat course at Santa Anita. She ran Jungle Peace to a half-length decision. And I'll just pull it up in Formulator. Jungle Peace for a while was one of the best turf fillies in California. She won a 6.5 furlong down the hill stakes race in the Senorita. They tried to stretch her out after that. They went to Kentucky Downs last time. She actually held her own against a really tough field. So, Jungle Peace is a legitimate foe. And I thought that Favor to You had the slightly tougher trip because she was a little awkward early, was wider on the turn, and was staying on at the end. So that was a really encouraging start to her career for a horse that could eventually wind up in a race like this. And since then, they've got either shorter or longer. They tried to go to Kentucky for a couple of races recently. Didn't get a great trip in the Teppan 2 back, and that was too far for her anyway. And last time out at Ellis Park, that was a race. I know people are going to say 21 and 43 is not a slow pace, but I like to look at the Timeform US pace figures, which account for not only how fast the track is playing on that day, but also how fast the other races at that distance go. And you could see all the fractions colored-coded blue. That was a slow pace. And you look up the chart, it was just a total merry-go-round. Nobody changed position in that race except for Favor to You, who rallied from last to third despite getting spun wide up on the far turn. So I just think she's a horse that's dirtied up coming in here, and she's finally landing in a spot where she's supposed to be at the right distance and hopefully get a little pace to close into, though that's tough to decipher how fast they're going to go up front.
Yeah, I think she's another one of those. Absolutely agree with you. You eliminate the mile races, and then right off the bat, for people who are just visual, cross out those 2 races going a mile, and then all of a sudden that sprint form looks really, really good. And the 5 furlongs at Del Mar is too short for her. So they were looking around. They couldn't run on that straight 5 furlong turf. Of course, they tried to go get the 5.5 at least at Ellis Park, and the race did not shape up for her at all. This should be way better for her. If I'm playing any type of late exotics, she's probably one of 3 or 4 that I have, David, and probably maybe against some of the shorter price horses and looking for 3 or 4 horses that are in the range of the couple I just mentioned and the 8 Favor to You.
One other horse I want to ask you about, Gino. What do you make of the number 5, Lee's Baby Girl, who took a long time to break her maiden, did so in a $50,000 claimer, and got claimed away from Doug O'Neill? That was back in February. And then Carla Gaines just lays this horse up for a period of months, brings her back at Del Mar, and not only does she win, but she does so against a pretty tough field at 15-1. And I didn't think there was anything too fluky about that performance. She spun out the top of the stretch. She turned away challenges to get the job done. The speed figure, when you look it up in Formulator, it totally checks out. I don't want to take a horse that was 15-1 last time and might be a shorter price against the tougher field, but it's not like she's going to be that short in this race. And I'm not so sure she can't win again.
And I think the Timeform US pace projector has her on the lead in here, David, if you look, because there's not that much other but proven early speed. She's coming out of some of the quicker races. If you just look at those last couple sprints that she exits, Carla Gaines claimed her. She's off for a while. And then in her first start back for Carla Gaines from the rail, she does something that she's never done before. She sits off horses a little bit. Her entire career before, she'd been really one-dimensional and just a speed horse and never a horse who really relaxed behind horses. That was a big positive to see. I don't mind her going 6.5 as I normally might with some of the 5 furlong horses at Del Mar, like some that we talked about throughout the show, because she does have form going a mile that is not bad and just seemed like a mile was a little bit too far for her. So this could maybe hit her right between the eyes. We saw her win at 6 furlongs, 2 starts back. She's not without a chance in here, and that's what made it fun when you can make cases for a lot of different big price horses in here.
That's exactly what I was thinking. I think this distance could work for her. Hopefully she gets a forward trip and some others don't go. But yeah, she's a backup I would want to use. I was getting alive to multiple horses in this race. She's probably the biggest price that I want to throw on my tickets.
It's a good card on Saturday at Santa Anita, 5 graded stakes. Take a look at some of those new wagers that they have. The Sunset Pick 3, Coast to Coast Pick 5, the Late Pick 3, which is $3. They have the $5 late double. Lots of different options for you. And David, we went through Belmont and Aqueduct. Churchill Downs have some big races. Yep. And then is it Keeneland next week that joins the party, right? As if we weren't busy enough.
Yep, Keeneland's going to be starting up. They'll have their own Breeders' Cup prep races. We'll have plenty of 2-year-old action next week. So I think we'll, again, have a stacked show when we do this live with you next week. But yeah, we'd love to hear from you guys. Leave some comments. Join next week early on. We can look up whatever you want, watch replays together, go through the handicapping process, and just hang out and share some opinions, because that's going to make all of our betting better when it comes to Saturday.
Yeah, and remember, if you want a little more help or some in-depth analysis on each of these races, we have a lot of the previews for you of individual races on the Daily Racing Form YouTube. So check those out, and hope you all have a great weekend. Good luck in all your plays.